Welcome to today's devotional message from Trusting God Always. You prayed, you fasted, you waited, and still, silence. Maybe this message is the sign you didn't know you needed. If these words meet you right where you are, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more souls who need God's comfort. Comment below with your favorite Bible promise, or the one you're still holding on to in the waiting. Let's begin, and let His Word breathe new life into yours. You sit by the window, the world outside moving at a pace you can only watch. Inside, there's a stillness, a heavy quiet that presses in. You've prayed, poured out your heart until it felt empty and exposed, laying bare your deepest needs and desires before God. You spoke of the job you desperately need to pay the bills and find purpose again. The healing you long for that medicine hasn't provided. The relationship that feels shattered beyond repair. The clear direction you seek in a season shrouded in confusing fog. You believe God heard you. The Bible promises He does, saying His eyes are on the righteous and His ears are open to their cry. But the silence is louder than you expected. It stretches out day after day, week after week, sometimes even year after year, a vast, unyielding desert landscape where answers should be blooming. You start to wonder if you said the wrong thing, if your prayer wasn't articulate enough, if you weren't faithful enough to earn His attention. If somehow you've been forgotten in the grand, unfolding story of God's active work in the world. This silence isn't just an absence of noise. It feels like an absence of response, an absence of movement, an absence of God Himself. It's like shouting into a deep well and hearing nothing but the echo of your own plea bouncing back. Maybe you've whispered the question into the quiet air of your empty room, the words barely audible even to yourself. Or perhaps it's a scream held captive behind your teeth, vibrating with frustration and fear. God, are you even there? Do you see me struggling? Do you hear these prayers that seem to hit the ceiling and fall back like dead leaves? It's in this vulnerable place, this aching gap between divine promise and perceived reality, that doubt finds fertile ground. Like weeds taking root in a neglected garden, the enemy loves the silence, doesn't he? He whispers questions that feel disturbingly like your own thoughts. See, nothing's happening. God isn't coming through for you. All that faith was wasted. You're on your own in this wilderness. The weight of that silence, the gnawing uncertainty of the waiting, can feel crushing, like a stone rolled over the entrance to your hope. You feel exposed, vulnerable, perhaps even a little foolish for continuing to hope against the evidence of the quiet. But deep within you, beneath the layers of doubt and discouragement, a tiny ember of faith still glows. Fanned by ancient promises you cling to in the dark. It whispers, but what if God is doing something I can't see, like a seed growing underground? What if this waiting isn't emptiness, but a hidden work, a slow, patient molding in the unseen? The silence is not necessarily God's absence. Sometimes it is His presence working in ways that require our stillness to perceive. Like oil, slowly filling a lamp, preparing it for the time its light is needed. God is filling you, strengthening you in this quiet pause. The deepest growth often happens in the darkness, just as a root system establishes itself unseen before the plant breaks the surface. This waiting is not wasted time. It is holy ground, where trust is refined and proven. It is a call not for strength to push through, but for surrender to lean into His unseen hand. You scroll through feeds, the highlight reels of lives unfolding. Another engagement ring sparkling, another pregnancy announcement, glowing smiles, a new job title, doors flung wide open. Friend after friend, family member after family member, celebrating milestones that feel galaxies away from where you stand. It hits you, a familiar ache in your chest. They are moving forward, speeding ahead, it seems, on brightly lit highways, while you feel parked on a dusty shoulder, engine off, watching the world whiz past. This isn't just about comparing your progress to theirs. It digs deeper, stirring up the profound loneliness of waiting when your own story feels paused indefinitely. You ask, why them? Why not me? What am I doing wrong? The silence often answers with the chilling whisper of inadequacy, suggesting that maybe your worth is measured by the forward steps you see others taking, the visible breakthroughs, the swift answers to prayers you might have prayed years ago. Here lies the quiet test of identity. Are you defining yourself by the external markers of progress, the job, the relationship, the achievement, or by your unwavering position in Christ? Are you anchored in the shifting sands of comparison, or in the solid ground of His love for you, precisely where you are? It's easy to see the mountain peaks others have reached and miss the sacred valley where God is cultivating resilience in your own soul. Perhaps the greatest movement forward is the one unseen, the deepening of your roots in Him during this season of stillness. Remember, God's timeline for your unique journey is not a reflection of your failures, but of His perfect, often mysterious plan. He is not beholden to the world's pace or its definition of success. He is writing your story, line by line, pause by pause. The page might seem blank right now, or filled with repetitive lines, but He sees the whole manuscript. His timing isn't a delay, it's divine orchestration, setting the stage for something only He can bring forth in your life. Can you find a quiet, gentle contentment in this current chapter, trusting that even in the waiting, even in the apparent stillness, God is actively at work, crafting a narrative that is perfectly, wonderfully yours? His love isn't less because your life looks different. His faithfulness isn't diminished because the breakthrough hasn't arrived yet. Sometimes the greatest leap of faith is standing still and knowing that He is God and He holds your story in His hands. He is not finished with you. The silence you hear is not His absence, but perhaps the sacred sound of Him carefully preparing the next glorious page. You sit in the quiet ache of waiting. You've planted the seed of your desire, your prayer, your hope, deep within the soil of faith. You've watered it with tears, nurtured it with whispered promises, and you stare at the surface day after day, week after week, seeing nothing. Just the same unbroken ground. This is the raw human struggle with God's time. Our impatience is a relentless clock ticking inside, while God seems to operate on an internal calendar we can't read. We want the bloom now, the visible sign of life pushing through, the instant confirmation that something, anything, is happening beneath the surface. But God's most profound work often takes place in the unseen, the hidden places, the sacred darkness beneath the soil. Imagine that tiny seed. You can't see the miracle unfolding within its shell. You can't witness the micro movements of life stirring. But it is there. The infinitesimal root is pushing down. Anchoring itself in unseen strength, the tender sprout is forming, gathering the silent courage to break through the resistance of the earth above it. This hidden process is crucial. The root must find its hold before the stalk can rise. The foundation must be secured before the blossom can unfurl. Yet our eyes are fixed only on the surface, on the lack of visible change, and anxiety whispers insidious lies. Nothing is happening. You're forgotten. Your prayers hit the ceiling. The wilderness feels vast, the dry season unending, and you wonder if the promised rain will ever fall on your patch of earth. This internal battle with the clock leads us to a core, magnificent biblical truth, a truth that feels counterintuitive to our fast-paced world. God's ways are not our ways, and His thoughts are infinitely higher than ours. Isaiah 55, 8-9 declares this grand cosmic perspective. Just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are His ways higher than ours, and His thoughts higher than our thoughts. The rain and the snow fall from heaven, not returning empty, but watering the earth, making it fruitful. So is God's word, His promise, His plan. It goes out and accomplishes its purpose. It will produce results, but perhaps not on the human timetable we've mapped out. His plan is like that rain and snow, working beneath the surface, nourishing the soil, ensuring life sprouts and flourishes, not necessarily when we expect it, but when the ground is ready, when the seed is ready, when the climate is perfect. The spiritual insight here is a profound invitation, surrendering your perceived timeline for His perfect one. It is releasing the tight grip on when you think things should manifest and trusting that God is working, that His promises are true, that He will indeed make all things beautiful in His time, as Ecclesiastes 3:11 promises. This trust demands a death to our own control, a relinquishing of our need to orchestrate and manipulate outcomes. It's like the farmer who plants the seed. He cannot force it to grow. He can only prepare the soil, plant, water, and trust the Creator to provide the increase according to the natural rhythms He has established. In our spiritual lives, the rhythm is often hidden grace unfolding in divine timing. This isn't about passive waiting. It's about active trust. It's understanding that God's delay is not denial, but often a sacred period of alignment. He is aligning circumstances you cannot see, softening hearts you cannot reach, strengthening your root system beneath the surface in ways you don't feel until the pressure of breaking through the soil begins. Perhaps He is protecting you from something you don't know about, or preparing something far greater than you imagined, something that requires a specific season to flourish. The anxiety you feel about the wait is met by His promise of perfect timing. The fear that it will never happen is answered by the assurance that His word will accomplish its purpose. The greatest growth often happens when we feel most stagnant, like the seed in the dark earth. This is the gentle paradox of the waiting season. Can you breathe deeply into this truth today? Can you look at the unbroken surface of your life, the silence after your prayer, not as proof of God's absence, but as evidence of His hidden activity? Can you choose to believe that the delay isn't a sign you've been forgotten, but a crucial part of the divine choreography? It requires a profound trust, a childlike faith that the gardener knows exactly when to bring the sprout to the light. It is finding rest in the assurance that He who began a good work in you is bringing it to completion, not on your schedule, but on His perfect one. Your task is not to rush the bloom, but to trust the process, to remain anchored in hope, while the unseen work unfolds. Let your grip on the clock loosen. Let your focus shift from the surface to the promise beneath. Trust that His hand is at work, preparing the way for beauty to break through. You feel the physical tension settle in your chest, a coiled spring of restless energy vibrating just beneath your skin. It manifests in a nervous fidget, the inability to truly settle into the quiet, the constant, almost involuntary urge to check your phone, refresh your email, peer down the road, hoping for that notification, that call, that sign that the waiting is finally over. This is the raw, undeniable ache of human impatience, a primal response to uncertainty and delay. It doesn't just feel like a lack of something. It feels like something actively pulling at you, eroding your peace. It can bubble up as sharp anxiety, simmer into frustrated resentment, or even erupt into sudden, unexpected anger at the world's apparent slowness. It shows us, with startling clarity, that waiting isn't a passive state of doing nothing. It's an active, often exhausting battle against the fleshly desire for immediate gratification, for control, for the power to simply make things happen on our timeline. But there is a deeper truth woven into this uncomfortable season. The spiritual insight here, the gentle whisper of God's purpose in the delay, is that He often, so often, uses this very waiting to cultivate within us something profoundly beautiful: patience. It is listed among the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5:22-23. Love, joy, peace, forbearance, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Patience isn't just about enduring. It's about developing an inner resilience, a quiet trust that can withstand the pressure of time and circumstance. It's a refining process, like gold purified in the fire, teaching us to rely not on the feverish churn of our own ability to manipulate outcomes or force doors open, but on the steady, unwavering strength of God. The wilderness wanderings taught this. The planting season demands this. The oil lamp, needing refilling in the night, requires this quiet, watchful waiting. Sometimes, the greatest strength is found in stillness. Sometimes, the fastest way forward is to simply stand firm where you are, rooted not in your own striving, but in His promise. Acknowledge the ache, yes. Feel the tension. Breathe into it. But then, gently, intentionally, take a deep breath. Allow the anxious energy to soften slightly as you exhale. And with quiet conviction, perhaps whispered aloud or just settled in your heart, declare the truth that transcends the immediate discomfort. I will wait for the Lord. My soul waits, and in His word I hope. Psalm 135. This isn't a passive resignation. It's an active choice to anchor your hope not in the changing tides of your circumstances, but in the unchanging rock of His character and His promises. It is choosing to believe that even in the silence, He is working. Even in the delay, He is faithful. This season of waiting, it's not wasted time. It's holy ground where patience grows. The clock ticks, a relentless rhythm against the silence of your unanswered prayers. You've waited, you've hoped, you've pleaded, and still the promise feels distant, a shimmering mirage in a wilderness of delay. This waiting weighs heavy, a slow, quiet pressure that whispers doubts into the soul. Has God forgotten? Is my faith enough? Maybe I need to help things along. This ancient struggle echoes in the dust of a faraway land, In the story of a man named Abraham, God spoke, a promise as vast as the night sky stretched above him, descendants, countless as the stars he was told to gaze upon. But years turned into decades. Sarah's womb remained barren ground. The promise felt impossible, the silence deafening. They grew old, and the fear gnawed. Will it ever happen? The ache for a child became a physical thing, a constant reminder of what was missing. It was in that space, the space between the promise and the perceived silence, that the human solution was born. Sarah, weary and afraid she would die without seeing God's word fulfilled, suggested a plan, a human attempt to birth the promise through Hagar, her servant. And Abraham agreed. This was their Ishmael, a son born not of the impossible supernatural promise given solely by God, but of human ingenuity, impatience, and the desire to help God achieve his plan. What began as a desperate act of faith twisted into a source of immense complication and heartache, a shadow that fell over generations. This scene isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror held up to our own hearts. Where are you tempted to build your own ladder to reach the heavens, instead of waiting for the Father to lift you? Where do you take the reins, believing your hustle or control will accelerate divine timing? Our Ishmaels are those human-conceived efforts, the forced relationships, the compromised ethics, the frantic striving born of a fear that God isn't working fast enough, or perhaps isn't working at all. The profound spiritual insight here is this: waiting is not passive idleness, it is active trust. It guards the garden of your hope against the weeds of impatience that would lead you to birth an Ishmael, a result of your own strained efforts that will inevitably bring complication. God isn't asking for your strength to make the promise happen, but for your surrender to His power to fulfill it perfectly, in His time. He is waiting to give you your Isaac, the son of laughter, the promise given solely by divine grace, born of supernatural possibility, not human limitation. Look closely at your own landscape. Are there places where you are forcing an outcome, trying to manufacture what only God can provide? Where is the fear of delay driving you to take matters into your own hands? The call here is gentle, yet powerful. Step back. Breathe. Release the reins you've white-knuckled for so long. Trust the divine author of your story. Your greatest act of faith in this season might not be striving, but simply stillness, waiting for the God who saw the stars above Abraham and promised to fulfill every single word he spoke. Wait for the Isaac. He is coming. You've felt it, haven't you? That restless urge, that knot of anxiety twisting in your gut, whispering, now. Maybe it was a job you desperately wanted, pushing yourself past exhaustion, ignoring the warning signs, crafting the perfect narrative even when the fit felt wrong in your soul. Or perhaps it was a relationship, clinging too tightly, trying to mold it into something it wasn't meant to be, afraid of the void that letting go might bring. Or an opportunity, shiny and promising, that you snatched up out of sheer panic, a fear of missing out, an impatience with the slow unfolding of life, jumping before you were truly called. You pushed, you pulled, you wrestled the moment into submission, forcing the lock, bending the frame, believing that sheer will and effort could blast through obstacles. And sometimes, for a fragile, fleeting moment, it looked like it worked. The door creaked open. You stepped through, breathless and triumphant, only to find the floorboards weren't stable. The air was thin, and the promised light was just a reflection. It fell apart. It led to heartache. The very thing you fought so hard for became a heavy burden, a constant source of stress, or a painful dead end. This striving, this desperate self-powered ascent, has an ancient echo. It's the story of Babel in modern dress. Genesis 11 tells of a people united, not in trust, but in self-reliance, saying, "Let us build a tower with its top in the heavens, lest we be dispersed." They sought to reach God's heights by their own means, on their own timeline, building their own security against the possibility of dispersion, rather than trusting God's command to fill the earth. It was a project of human pride, born of fear and impatience, designed to make a name for themselves and control their destiny. And just like the tower, when we try to force our way to our desired outcome, the foundation is often shaky, built on sand rather than the rock of God's perfect will. The profound, liberating truth we often resist is this: divine timing ensures divine support. There's a quiet power in the doors God opens. They don't require battering rams or desperate pleading. When God opens a door, no one can close it. The path is clear. The resources are often provided in surprising ways, and there is a deep, abiding peace that settles over the decision, even when it's challenging. It feels less like a struggle against the current and more like floating with the tide. Conversely, when we force a door, when we pry it open with our own strength, fueled by fear or impatience, it often lacks His blessing, His provision, His sustaining grace. We might get through, but we find ourselves walking a lonely road, carrying burdens He never intended us to bear, constantly having to prop up the wobbly structure we built ourselves. The energy required to maintain a forced reality is exhausting. The peace found in a God-opened door is restoring. Waiting, in this context, is not passive idleness. Waiting is an active posture of trust. It is a spiritual discipline that protects us. It protects us from walking through the wrong doors, the ones that glitter but lead to emptiness. It protects us from walking through the right doors at the wrong time, before we are ready, before the necessary pieces are in place, before God's full purpose for that season can be realized. And perhaps most importantly, it protects us from walking through doors with the wrong motives, seeking validation, fleeing discomfort, driven by insecurity rather than divine calling. The wilderness was a place of waiting for Israel, teaching them dependence. Jesus waited 30 years before His public ministry, waiting for the fullness of time. Waiting cultivates patience, sharpens discernment, and deepens our reliance on God's wisdom rather than our own limited understanding. It's in the quiet stillness of waiting that we learn to distinguish the loud clamor of our own desires from the gentle nudge of His Spirit. Maybe you've been standing before a seemingly locked door for a long time. The world screams at you to make a move, to break it down, to do something. Your own heart aches with the delay, the fear of being left behind. But the spiritual question today is a gentle mirror held up to your soul. Are you currently trying to force a door open? Are you expending precious energy pushing against something that isn't meant to yield to your strength? Take a moment now, in the quiet space of your heart. Bring that situation before the One who holds all moments in His hands. Lay down the hammer, the crowbar, the anxious blueprints you've drawn up. Pray not for the strength to force the door, but for the wisdom to discern, To know the difference between a door God is sovereignly opening for you in His perfect timing and one your own impatience, fear, or self-will is desperately trying to pry open. Sometimes, the greatest step of faith is the step back from the door, trusting that if it's meant to be, He will be the one to swing it wide. Waiting doesn't mean God isn't working. Often, He is doing His deepest work in you, preparing you for the opened door, and preparing the path beyond it. What feels like a delay might actually be divine preparation. What seems like a closed door might be His protection. Let the stillness speak. You sit in the silence, wondering if your prayer was even heard. The wind taps the window, like God's whisper waiting for your stillness. Welcome to today's devotional message, Trusting God Always. You prayed, you fasted, you waited, and still, silence. Maybe this message is the sign you didn't know you needed. If these words meet you right where you are, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more souls who need God's comfort. Comment below with your favorite Bible promise, or the one you're still holding on to in the waiting. Let's begin, and let His Word breathe new life into yours. You know the feeling, don't you? That hollow ache when you feel trapped, unfairly treated, lost in a place you never expected to be. It's the chill of a forgotten corner, the sting of betrayal, the weight of waiting when all seems still and stagnant. It feels like a pit, a deep, dark, confining space where the light struggles to reach, and hope feels like a distant, mocking echo. Maybe you've been sold into a form of slavery, beholden to circumstances, toxic relationships, crushing debt, or relentless addiction. Maybe you've been falsely accused, misunderstood, judged, defined by someone else's lie or mistake. Maybe you feel utterly forgotten, left behind while the world moves on, praying for help that never seems to arrive, a promise that seems to have expired. Think about Joseph. His story is the masterclass in waiting in the pit. One moment, he's a favored son, dreaming big dreams under the sun. The next, betrayed by his own brothers, stripped of his colorful coat, a symbol of his identity and future, and sold into the darkness of slavery. Genesis 37. Imagine the journey, the shock, the humiliation. He arrives in Egypt, finds some footing in Potiphar's house, only to be falsely accused and thrown into a prison cell. Genesis 39. The pit deepens. It's a place of profound injustice, isolation, and helplessness. He waits. He waits for years. Years turn into a lifetime in that confined space, forgotten by those he helped. The dreams he once held, seemingly reduced to dust motes in the dim light of his cell. The suffering is palpable, not just physical confinement, but the soul-crushing weight of unfairness and the slow erosion of hope. This wasn't a temporary setback. This was a long, agonizing wait in a pit he didn't deserve to be in. Yet, this is where the profound spiritual insight arrives, like a fragile shoot pushing through concrete. The truth of Joseph's story is not just about his survival. It's about God's unwavering presence and purpose in the pit. Even in the darkest, most unfair waiting periods, God was with him. He was not alone. While Joseph was waiting, God was working. He was refining Joseph's character, stripping away youthful arrogance, teaching him dependence, humility, and resilience. He was preparing Joseph for leadership in a way that prosperity and ease never could. He was orchestrating events, the dreams of fellow prisoners, the Pharaoh's need, the famine years ahead, for a greater good that Joseph couldn't possibly see or comprehend from his isolated cell. God's hand was moving the pieces on a cosmic chessboard, even when Joseph felt like a discarded pawn. This is the gentle paradox. Sometimes God draws us into the deepest, hidden places precisely because that is where His most transformative work can happen, away from the noise and distractions of the surface. Waiting doesn't mean God is absent. It means He is often doing His deepest work in the hidden places of our lives, forging strength in the silence, preparing breakthrough in the brokenness. Reflect for a moment. If you feel like you're in a pit today, stuck, forgotten, suffering injustice, simply waiting with no end in sight, remember Joseph. God is with you, just as He was with him. He is working, even now, in ways you cannot perceive. He is not asking for your understanding of the plan, only for your trust in His presence. Can you lean into that truth? Can you believe that His hand is moving even in the darkness? Can you whisper, "God, I trust You are here," even when you can't see the way out of the pit? His deepest work is often done in the hidden seasons, forging resilience, shaping destiny, preparing you for the calling He has placed on your life. The pit is not the end. It is often the crucible where the greatest leaders and the most faithful servants are forged. Trust the process. Trust the presence. Trust the One who is with you. Even here, you feel the pressure mounting. Every phone call, every email, every unexpected noise outside feels like a potential threat. You're not running from a physical king in ancient Israel, but perhaps you're running from financial ruin, from a difficult diagnosis, from the ghosts of past failures, from a future that seems determined to corner you. You had a promise whispered to your soul, a dream planted in your heart, perhaps even a moment of clear anointing, where God seems to declare a destiny over your life. And yet, here you are, hiding, waiting, running. Think of a young man, strong, favored, anointed with oil by a revered prophet. The Spirit of God comes powerfully upon him. The promise is clear. He is to be king. The future is set. The throne awaits. His name is David. But the path to the throne isn't paved with gold. It's marked by dust, sweat, and the chill of mountain caves. Instead of sitting in a palace, David is pursued by the jealous rage of King Saul, the very man he served and comforted. Saul, once lifted high, now hunts the one God has chosen, driving David from city to city, into the wilderness, into the very crevices of the earth. For years, David lived in the wilderness. Can you imagine? Waking up in a cave, the damp air clinging to your skin, the sounds of the wild your only companions, except for the loyal few who gathered around him, outcasts themselves. Each sunrise brought the risk of discovery, each sunset a fear of the approaching night. The promise of the throne felt like a cruel whisper against the harsh reality of his exile. He had the anointing, the divine endorsement, but his days were filled with hardship, fear, and feeling constantly under threat. The spiritual insight here is profound, even unsettling. God's waiting period isn't always comfortable. It can be brutally hard. It can be a season of intense testing, feeling exposed and vulnerable, even when the outcome seems divinely promised. The wilderness is not a detour. It is often the designated path. The waiting is not empty. It is filled with a difficult, essential process. David's years on the run, seemingly wasted in exile and survival, were in fact his most critical training ground. He learned reliance on God, not from a comfortable pew, but from the hard ground of a cave floor, crying out in psalms born of desperation and unwavering faith. His famous psalms echo this tension. I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him. Psalm 142, 2, written from a cave. But also, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Psalm 23, 1, a profound declaration of trust forged in the crucible of need. He develops leadership skills not commanding armies, but by managing a ragtag group of debtors, distressed and discontented men. 1 Samuel 22:2. He turned outcasts into warriors, teaching them loyalty and trust, just as he was learning to trust God implicitly. He built deep character, patience, perseverance, humility, strategic thinking, compassion for his followers, and a fierce, unshakable faith during these years on the run. The wilderness wasn't wasted. It was his university. It was his forge. It was the hidden season where God stripped away the shepherd boy and shaped the king. It was a paradox. Losing control was how he gained authority. Running away was how he prepared to rule. Waiting in the shadows was how he learned to walk in the light of God's presence above all else. Perhaps you are in your own wilderness season right now. Perhaps you are running from the consequences of mistakes, or hiding from the gaze of judgment, or simply waiting in a place you never expected to be, far from the dream you held. You feel like your life is on hold, maybe even regressing. The promise feels distant. The anointing seems silent. God feels far away, or perhaps near but deliberately inactive, watching you navigate the rocks and thorns. This scene from David's life whispers a truth you might desperately need to hear. The waiting period is preparing you for the promise. This hardship is building something resilient within you. This time of feeling under threat is teaching you to find your security not in circumstances, but in the immovable presence of God. What skills, character traits, or deeper reliance on God might He be building in you during this time of waiting and difficulty? Are you learning patience as your timeline stretches? Are you developing perseverance as obstacles multiply? Are you discovering a depth of faith you never knew you had as you cry out to God from your own cave? Are you learning true leadership by serving and loving the few God has placed around you in this season? God is not wasting your wilderness. He is working in it. He is not indifferent to your struggle. He is using it to shape you. The fear you feel is real, but it does not define the outcome. The uncertainty is valid, but it does not negate His promise. Like David, you may feel like you are constantly running, constantly exposed. But remember who is running with you, who is your hiding place, your shield, your strength in times of trouble. Psalm 46:1. Trust the process, even when it feels like a punishment. Trust the waiting, even when it stretches on endlessly. Trust the God who led David through the wilderness to the throne, for He is the same God leading you. His timing is not a delay, it is divine preparation. His methods are not always comfortable, they are always purposeful. Rest in the assurance that the miles you run while waiting are not lost. They are marking the path towards the fulfillment of His promise in your life. Find shelter not in escaping the wilderness, but in finding God within it. You sit in the quiet stillness of what feels like nowhere. Days blur into weeks, weeks into years. The grand plans you once held shimmer now like distant mirages. This season wasn't in your blueprint. It feels like a detour, a place where potential gathers dust, and the vibrant colors of your calling seem muted, almost forgotten. You wonder if God forgot you here, in this quiet, unproductive stretch. Think of Moses, the prince of Egypt, raised in palaces, trained in power. He saw the suffering of his people, felt the divine spark to deliver them. He acted in his own strength, in his own timing, and he failed. He fled, not to another palace, not to a place of honor, but to the backside of the desert, to the vast, silent wilderness of Midian. For 40 years watching sheep graze, mapping silent canyons, talking perhaps only to the wind and the stars. 40 years, a prince becoming a shepherd, a man of action living a life of quiet repetition. They felt insignificant. It felt like wasted time. God could have used him immediately. Surely? Why this long, drawn-out, seemingly unproductive season? But the spiritual insight here is profound, a truth that whispers through the sand dunes of unproductive seasons. God often uses periods of apparent insignificance, these wilderness times, not to forget you, but to strip away everything you relied on. He was taking the prince out of Moses, removing the self-sufficiency, the reliance on Egyptian power, the human impatience. He was cultivating humility, dependence, intimacy. The wilderness wasn't a punishment. It was preparation. It was a furnace, heating, refining, shaping. It was necessary formation for the man who would stand before Pharaoh, not as a prince, but as a humble, God-dependent servant, armed with nothing but a shepherd's staff and the power of Yahweh. You might feel like you are in your own wilderness right now. A job that feels like a holding pattern, a dream deferred, a quiet season after a public failure or disappointment. It feels unproductive, maybe even forgotten by the world, perhaps even by God. But what if this quiet, seemingly empty space is exactly where God is doing his deepest work in you? What if he's using the stillness to strip away your striving, your need for external validation, your reliance on your own strength or your past achievements? What if he's using the monotony to cultivate patience, to teach you to find joy not in achievement, but in his presence alone? This wilderness isn't empty time. It's holy ground. It's the place where your roots grow deeper, when there's nothing else to do but sink them into the unseen source. It's where the noise of the world fades so you can hear the still, small voice that will guide you to the burning bush moment that is coming. Don't despise the quiet, the slow, the seemingly insignificant. God isn't waiting for you to be ready in your own strength. He's using this time to make you utterly dependent on His. Trust that He is working, even when it looks like nothing. He knows exactly what He's doing in the quiet. The weight settles in your chest, the heavy cloak of unanswered prayers. You've laid your deepest longings before God, not just once, but 100 times. You've watered the ground with tears, sown seeds of desperate hope, and watched the calendar pages turn, mocking your patience. Every morning feels like another step deeper into the fog of not yet. Doubt whispers insidious questions. Did He hear? Does He care? Or is this silence proof that I'm forgotten? This is the wilderness of waiting, a place where faith feels thin, and the landscape is barren of visible answers. It's easy to believe that God has paused, that the divine clock has stopped, or that you've somehow missed the turn and are now stranded in spiritual limbo. Anxiety tightens its grip, painting scenarios of perpetual delay, of dreams deferred indefinitely. You see others move forward, their prayers seemingly answered with swift grace, while you stand still, feeling like a statue etched in stone by stagnation. The fear isn't just about what you're waiting for, but the terror that the waiting itself is the final answer, a quiet no disguised as delay. But step closer, lean in, the truth whispers, not from the loud shouts of breakthrough, but from the quiet hum beneath the surface of reality. God doesn't make us wait because He is slow or uncaring. He makes us wait because waiting itself is part of the process. It's not an empty gap before the work, but the work itself unfolding in ways you cannot yet perceive. Imagine the refiner's fire. It doesn't just remove impurities, it strengthens the metal, prepares it for its ultimate purpose. You are in that fire now. The tension on a bowstring isn't wasted energy. It's the precise buildup of power that will launch the arrow furthest. Your spirit is being stretched, made ready for a trajectory you haven't even dreamed of. The roots of a mighty oak don't grow shallowly. They stretch deep, unseen, grappling with the darkness below, ensuring stability for the immense growth to come. Your roots of faith are being strengthened, anchoring you against storms you haven't yet faced. The spiritual insight is profound, gentle, and often counterintuitive. The wait is not merely an interval before the blessing, but often the means of blessing itself. It is shaping you, aligning your will with His, cultivating resilience, deepening your dependence on Him alone, and preparing the ground of your heart to receive what He has in store. Waiting has purpose. It is an active, holy work of God in your soul, even when it feels like absolutely nothing is happening externally. The deepest transformations often occur in the quietest, most inactive feeling seasons. You are not idling. You are being refined, rooted, and readied. Can you shift your perspective just for a moment? From the aching, desperate question of why am I still waiting, to the hopeful, surrendered inquiry of what is God doing in me while I wait? It is in this sacred pause that He is often doing His most significant, foundational work. Trust the pause. It holds a hidden purpose. The silence in the waiting room of your soul stretches out, longer than any clock could measure. You came expecting rescue, a sudden turn, a clear signpost pointing the way out of this wilderness. Instead, you find yourself trapped with the one person you often try to avoid when things get hard: yourself. The waiting forces this uncomfortable, necessary confrontation. It's here, in the stillness that wasn't your first choice, that the layers begin to peel back. You see the raw edges of your fears, the gnawing insecurity that whispers you aren't enough, the white-knuckled grip on things you never truly controlled in the first place. It feels like exposure, like standing naked under a harsh light. This discomfort isn't punishment. It is the very ground where deep growth happens. The Bible, in its beautiful, unflinching wisdom, speaks of this. James writes about the testing of our faith, those very trials, often involving agonizing waits and unanswered questions, producing steadfastness. This steadfastness, this patient endurance, is not the end goal in itself. It's the muscle being built, the steel being forged. And when steadfastness is allowed to complete its work, allowed to run its course without us trying to shortcut the process or flee the discomfort, it makes us complete, lacking in nothing. Imagine that, completeness, forged in the fire of waiting. It's a powerful, almost paradoxical truth. The season you feel is draining you dry is actually filling you up with the very things you need most. This spiritual insight reveals waiting not as God's delay, but as His crucial tool for character formation. He isn't primarily concerned with your immediate comfort, though his heart aches for your pain. He is infinitely more concerned with your eternal character, with the slow, deliberate work of making you more like Jesus. He uses the pressures of the weight to refine you, just as a jeweler uses intense heat to purify gold, burning away the dross. Look closely at this period of waiting you're in. What has it exposed in your life? Is it the sharp sting of impatience, revealing how accustomed you are to instant gratification? Is it a profound fear of the unknown, highlighting a need to trust the one who knows the end from the beginning? Perhaps it's the illusion of control being shattered, inviting you to rest in divine sovereignty. These aren't flaws to be shamed. They are areas where God is gently, persistently inviting you to surrender. He's asking you to yield that impatience, that fear, that need to control, and allow Him to transform them, brick by patient brick, into godly character. It's an invitation to collaborate with the Master Builder, letting Him work within the very structure of your soul during this quiet, hidden season. This waiting is not empty time. It is sacred space for becoming. You check the calendar again. Another day unfolds, looking much like the one before, and the one before that. The promise feels distant, the breakthrough a rumor whispered on the wind. And in this long pause, you feel it. A quiet erosion, not just of hope, but of self. Who are you truly when the markers you used to measure life seem frozen? When your identity felt tied to being the one doing the thing, the one achieving the goal, the one on the timeline. And now you are simply the one, waiting. This season, this space between here and there, can feel like a deep, unsettling identity crisis. It strips away the titles, the roles, the future plans we cling to like anchors in a storm. You weren't just waiting for a job, or a partner, or healing. You were also waiting to be someone defined by those outcomes. And in the quiet emptiness of the delay, the question echoes. If I'm not defined by my progress, my achievements, my timeline, what defines me? This is where God meets you, not with an answer about when the waiting ends, but with a revelation about who you are in the midst of it. He sees you, not as a project on hold, but as His beloved child. Before you did anything, achieved anything, or even prayed for anything, He chose you. He redeemed you. He called you His own. Your security is not built on the shifting sands of external circumstances, the job status, the relationship status, the health status, but on the bedrock of your identity in Christ. The waiting is not a void where your identity disappears. It is a refining fire intended to burn away the false anchors. It's a process where God gently pries your fingers from the things you thought defined you. Your performance, your problems, your future plans, and redirects your gaze. He is showing you that your worth is not in what you do, what you have, or what is happening to you, but solely, gloriously in whose you are. You belong to Him. You are loved by Him. You are cherished by Him. That truth is more stable than any outcome the world could offer. So, as you sit in this waiting, feeling the weight of undefined days, remember this. Your identity is not the one who is still waiting. It is the one whom God dearly loves and is faithfully guiding, even through the stillness. He is not asking you to manufacture purpose or force an outcome. He is inviting you to discover that the deepest, most secure part of you is untouchable by the seasons of delay. It is rooted in His unwavering love and acceptance. It exists, complete and whole, simply because you are His. Perhaps the greatest work happening in this wait is not the preparation for what comes next, but the quiet, powerful work within you, solidifying your sense of self not in the fleeting, but in the eternal. How can you today consciously choose to root your sense of self deeper in your identity as a beloved child of God, rather than in the ever-changing seasons or uncertain outcomes of your waiting? You trace the edge of the window pane, the world outside a blur, much like the future you're desperately trying to bring into focus. Every prayer feels aimed at a destination, a solution, a rescue, a breakthrough that isn't here yet. You've mapped out scenarios, rehearsed potential outcomes, and held your breath, waiting for the cosmic email that says, "It's done." The anxiety hums beneath your skin, a constant reminder that the desired outcome remains just out of reach. You are fixed on the what if, on the when, on the arrival at the end point where the struggle ceases and peace presumably reigns. But what if the peace you seek isn't waiting at the destination, but is available within the journey itself? What if the ultimate freedom isn't the change in circumstance, but the change in your heart, a shift in focus from the hoped-for outcome to the undeniable reality of the one walking beside you? Think of the shepherd in Psalm 23. He doesn't promise to beam you over the valley of the shadow of death. He promises to be with you in it. Psalm 23:4. His rod and staff comfort you while you are surrounded by darkness, not just after you emerge into the light. The profound spiritual truth isn't about skipping the difficult parts. It's about recognizing His presence in the difficult parts. Too often, we chase God's hand, seeking His provision, His rescue, His outcome, when He is longing for us to seek His face, His presence, His intimacy, His very being. The waiting isn't merely a pause before the answer. It is often the sacred space where we learn the immeasurable value of just being with Him, regardless of what tomorrow holds. It is in this quiet space, where outcomes are uncertain, that we can discover a peace that defies circumstances, a deep contentment rooted not in what might happen, but in who is always present. Can you allow yourself, even for a single moment, to let the what-if fade and the He is with me take root? The journey isn't a hurdle to overcome to get to the outcome. It is the sacred path where the shepherd reveals himself in deeper ways than the destination ever could. The ultimate freedom is learning to breathe deeply in His presence, right here, right now, trusting that being with Him is infinitely more precious than any outcome you could possibly imagine. This presence is the treasure, the true answer, waiting to be discovered, not at the finish line, but with every step you take, held within His watchful, loving gaze. You crafted the plan. You marked the calendar. Every step outlined, every date circled, a perfect map leading to a desired future. And yet, here you sit, watching the days tick by, not according to your schedule, but according to a timing you cannot decipher. This is the silent battle fought in the quiet hours, the struggle to surrender the timeline. We cling to our envisioned sequence of events, believing our plan is the only path to blessing or breakthrough. It's as if we hand God the blueprint, but also insist on dictating the construction schedule. The anxiety tightens its grip when the expected promotion doesn't arrive on your timeline, when the relationship doesn't progress at your pace, when the healing takes longer than your heart anticipated. The wilderness season stretches further than you thought you could endure, and you wonder if the promised land is lost in the mists of God's delay. Your soul yearns for the destination, but your spirit chafes against the unexpected detour. But the ancient whisper, carried on the wind of truth, offers a different path. The Apostle Paul, no stranger to unforeseen shipwrecks and prison cells, penned words that cut through the noise of our anxious calendars. Philippians 4:6-7 calls us not to be anxious about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, to present our requests to God. And in return, the peace of God, a peace that transcends all understanding, will stand guard over our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Notice the profound paradox here. You pour out your specific worries and desires, petition, and the answer is not always a change in circumstance, but a change in state, an inexplicable peace guarding the very control center of your being. This peace isn't the absence of uncertainty, it is the presence of God's stillness within the uncertainty. The spiritual insight woven into this promise is breathtaking in its simplicity and difficulty. Surrender is not defeat. It is transfer. It is not giving up on the dream or the prayer. It is giving over the weight of the clock, the pressure of the deadline, the burden of orchestrating it all, from your finite, weary shoulders to God's infinite strength and perfect wisdom. Imagine trying to hold back the tide with your bare hands. That is the energy expended in trying to control God's timing. Surrendering the timeline is the act of dropping your hands, stepping back, and trusting that the author of time holds the tides, the seasons, and the unfolding chapters of your story in His sovereign, loving grip. It's a profound act of faith that says, "My plan is good, but yours is perfect, and I trust your when as much as I trust your what." This release allows the peace that surpasses understanding to flood the spaces where anxiety used to dwell, transforming the clenched fist of control into an open hand of expectant faith. What timeline are you holding on to tightly today? The one for healing, for provision, for a specific outcome? How can you intentionally release the pressure of when and how to God right now through prayer, truly trusting His perfect, glorious timing, even when it feels agonizingly slow? The quiet hum of life outside your window feels distant. Inside, there's a stillness that isn't peace, but the heavy pause of waiting. You've poured out your heart, laid bare your deepest longings, perhaps for a breakthrough, a sign, a path forward, or a healing that seems perpetually postponed. The calendar pages have turned, seasons have shifted, yet the answer you long for remains unseen, unheard. Doubt, like a slow creeping tide, threatens to engulf the small island of hope you cling to. This waiting feels less like a holy process and more like a stagnant pool, where faith slowly evaporates under the relentless sun of uncertainty. You feel inactive, adrift, caught in a limbo you didn't choose, wondering if God has forgotten your address, if His promises have an expiry date. But what if the waiting itself is not a void, but a sacred space? What if this stillness is not stagnation, but the fertile ground where a deeper kind of faith takes root? Scripture offers us a different lens. Hebrews 11:1 tells us, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." It's not the absence of difficulty that proves faith, but the presence of assurance in the midst of difficulty. Faith doesn't require seeing the destination. It requires believing in the guide. It is the profound paradox of finding movement in stillness, of feeling secure in uncertainty. This truth stands directly against the real-world fears that grip us in the waiting. Anxiety whispers, "What if it never happens?" Loss echoes, "It's already too late." Doubt questions, "Did you even hear God right?" Rejection stings, "You aren't worth His attention." The long wait amplifies every insecurity, turning the quiet moments into battlegrounds for your trust. It's in these moments, when every external circumstance screams impossible or never, that faith steps forward, not with blind optimism, but with a quiet, unwavering conviction. God is good. God is faithful. God will do what He said He will do. Look at the heroes etched into the Hall of Faith in Hebrews 11. Abraham waited decades for the son of promise, then waited again, prepared to sacrifice that son, trusting God would provide. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before leading a nation, then another 40 wandering before reaching the border of the promised land he would never enter. Sarah laughed at the impossibility before holding Isaac. Rahab, a stranger, placed her hope in the unseen God of Israel. These weren't people who saw instant results. They were people who waited. They persevered. They acted in obedience while they waited. They built altars. They packed bags. They crossed Red Seas. They marched around walls, all fueled by a belief in a future they hadn't yet fully grasped. Many of them, the chapter tells us, did not receive the things promised, but saw them and greeted them from afar. Hebrews 11:13. Their faith wasn't validated by seeing the fulfillment in their lifetime, but by trusting the character of the one who made the promise. The spiritual insight woven into the fabric of waiting is this: the delay isn't just about the timing of the promise, it's about the shaping of your soul. Waiting is the crucible where head knowledge about God transforms into deep, heart-level trust. It's where faith muscles are built, not through effortless victories, but through the strain of holding on when you want to let go. It moves us beyond theoretical assent to practical, lived-out dependence. It's like a plant pushing through hard soil. The struggle is what makes it strong. The wilderness journey wasn't the Israelites' punishment. It was their necessary formation. The trimming of the oil lamp wasn't about reducing the flame. It was about preparing it to burn brightly and long. So how do you actively exercise faith today in the midst of your waiting? This isn't about frantic striving or trying to manipulate circumstances. It's about the posture of your heart and the choices you make in the stillness. Perhaps it's choosing praise over the low hum of worry that fills your thoughts. Worry is faith misplaced. Praise is faith rightly directed. Perhaps it's choosing obedience in the small daily tasks God has given you, even when impatience screams for a shortcut or a different path. Obedience in the waiting is a quiet declaration. I trust you with the outcome, so I will trust you with the present moment. Perhaps it's choosing quiet trust over the urge to strive, control, or force things into being. It's the surrender that says, my future is safe in your hands, so I can be still in yours. The faith that waits is not passive inactivity. It is active, persevering faith, anchored in the assurance of what is hoped for and the conviction of what is unseen. It is believing God will fulfill His promises, even when every external circumstance suggests otherwise, and continuing to live in faithful obedience while we wait. It is finding strength in stillness, progress in perceived stagnation, clarity in the fog of waiting. Reflect on this. What small, faithful act can you take today that declares your trust in God, even as you wait for the larger picture to unfold? Is it choosing praise when your heart feels heavy? Is it choosing a small act of obedience when impatience nags? Is it choosing quiet trust when anxiety attempts to overwhelm you? This is the work of active waiting. This is the faith that endures. This is the posture that honors God in the space between the promise and its fulfillment. You remember those nights, the heavy quiet settling in, the kind that presses against your chest like a stone. You waited, you prayed, you wrestled with the silence that felt like abandonment. Every day stretched into weeks, weeks into months, maybe even years. You watched others move forward, their paths clearing, while yours seemed shrouded in fog, a stagnant pond when you longed for a rushing river. Doubt whispered its insidious lies. Has God forgotten? Is this wait a sign of His displeasure? Are you simply stuck, wasting time while life passes by? The wilderness felt vast. The night seemed unending. You were the seed buried in the dark earth, wondering if the sun would ever find you. This wasn't the story you expected. You imagined swift rescues, dramatic interventions, a straight line from prayer to promise fulfilled. Instead, you got the long road, the hidden season, the agonizing lack of visible progress. You measured your worth, your faith, by the perceived success or movement in your life, and in the stillness, you felt lacking. But look back now, through the lens of gentle hindsight. What if that darkness wasn't a void, but a sacred subterranean space? What if the stillness wasn't stagnation, but incubation? The profound truth, the one that reorders your perspective, is this: God wastes nothing in the lives of His children. Nothing. Not the tears shed in frustration, not the anxious pacing in the living room, not the quiet ache of unmet longing. The wait wasn't wasted. It wasn't a pause in God's plan. It was the plan for that particular season. Think of the ground before a great harvest. It doesn't look like much. It's tilled, sometimes bare, sometimes covered in the decay of the last season. But beneath the surface, the unseen work is furious. Roots are reaching, nutrients are being absorbed, structure is being formed. Your waiting season was like that fertile, unseen ground. While you felt dormant, God was diligently, lovingly, tirelessly at work. He was preparing the circumstance you were waiting for, yes, orchestrating details you couldn't possibly grasp. He was preparing the opportunity, ensuring the timing was not just good, but perfect in His divine economy. But more importantly, infinitely more importantly, He was preparing you. Consider the refiner's fire. It doesn't look comfortable. It looks like intense heat, like destruction. But the heat is precisely what purifies the metal, burning away the dross and revealing the precious core. Your waiting season, with its pressures and uncertainties, was a refining fire. It stripped away layers of self-reliance you didn't know were there. It burned off expectations built on worldly timelines rather than God's. It tested the foundations of your faith, forcing you to ask, do I trust Him when I see no movement? Do I believe His character is good, even when my circumstances are hard? That quiet growth, the internal strengthening you didn't advertise, wasn't accidental. It was intentional. Every challenge faced in the silence was a lesson embedded deep within your spirit. Every moment of choosing faith over fear, even when trembling, was a muscle strengthening. The resilience you possess today wasn't forged in comfort. It was hammered out in the long, slow burn of enduring. Your faith deepened not just despite the weight, but because of it. You learned to lean on a God who felt distant, discovering that His presence isn't measured by circumstantial evidence, but by the quiet assurance He breathes into your soul. Perhaps the most profound work God did was clarifying your identity. When the external markers of progress or success are removed, you are left with the core question: who am I in God's eyes, regardless of my circumstances? The waiting season often forces this question, stripping away identity tied to what you do or what you have, and anchoring it in whose you are, a beloved child of the King, deeply known and profoundly loved, not for your performance, but for His grace. This period of quiet growth aligned your heart more fully with His. When your desires were constantly being filtered through the sieve of delay, you had to confront them, surrender them, and gradually, subtly, begin to want what He wants, to see from His perspective. The person who emerges from the wait is not the same person who entered it. They are stronger, tempered like fine steel. They are wiser, having learned lessons the easy road could never teach. And most beautifully, they are more intimately acquainted with the faithfulness of God. You know Him in a way you couldn't before, not just as the God of sudden miracles, but as the God of the long haul, the God who sustains in the darkness, the God who is working even when you cannot see His hand. Take a moment now. In the quiet space this message creates, can you begin to identify specific ways God has worked in you during this waiting period? Not just in the circumstance you were hoping for, though that is part of His story too, but in the formation of your soul? How did your perspective shift? How did your prayer life change? What did you learn about surrender, patience, or trusting His timing? What strengths did you discover you possessed? What lies did you learn to reject? What truths about His character became non-negotiable anchors? Even if the longed-for outcome hasn't fully manifested yet, the work done within you is a finished masterpiece in progress. Thank Him for that unseen work. Thank Him for not wasting a single moment, a single tear, a single struggle. Thank Him for the refining, the strengthening, the shaping. Thank Him for the person you are becoming, forged in the furnace of the wait, ready for whatever His faithful hand guides you toward next. The delay wasn't denial. It was divine development, and the wait was not wasted. And so, here you stand, at the edge of this quiet reflection. Perhaps the season of waiting still stretches before you, a landscape shrouded in mist, where answers feel distant and the path forward remains unseen. But maybe, just maybe, as these words settle, your heart has begun a subtle shift, from the frantic pulse of anxiety to a deeper, more quiet assurance. The night, as heavy and long as it feels in the moment, does not last forever. The oldest rhythm of creation whispers this truth: dawn always, inevitably, breaks. And His timing, that grand, often mysterious orchestration that unfolds across your life, is not just good, it is perfect. When His moment arrives, that divine appointment where the waiting yields to breakthrough, it will arrive with unmistakable clarity. It will be powerful, undeniable, and in that radiant light, you will understand, deep in your soul, that the waiting was never in vain. It was not an empty pause or a punishment. It was the sacred ground being prepared, tilled, and readied for what was to come. It was the unseen foundation being laid, stone by careful stone, firm and unshakable. It was the roots of your faith pushing deeper into the dark, rich soil of dependency on Him, growing strong where they could not be seen. The struggle in the quiet places built a resilience the easy paths could never forge. This season, hidden from the world and perhaps even from your own full understanding, was profoundly productive in His economy. The bedrock truth, the unwavering pillar that stands through every season of uncertainty, is His absolute faithfulness. He is not a man who lies. His promises are yes and amen. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the architect of your yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He who promised is faithful. Hebrews 10:23. He is still actively writing your story, every chapter deliberate, every plot twist purposeful. And yes, this waiting chapter, with its quiet tensions, its testing of patience, its call to surrender, is not filler, it is crucial. It is essential scaffolding for the breathtaking unfolding He has planned, a necessary crucible refining you for the glory He will reveal. This is the invitation now. Trust the author. He holds the pen, the plot points, the perfect climax. Trust His process, even when it feels slow, even when it feels silent. Trust His perfect timing, even when your clock screams too late. Release the white-knuckled grip on your own timeline. The desperate need to control the unpredictable flow of moments. There is a profound peace waiting for you in releasing the need to control the clock and resting, truly resting, in the knowledge that you are held, not loosely, but securely, in the hands of the One who holds all of time itself. Even if the silence persists a little longer, even if the dawn feels like a distant rumor, remember the secret life happening beneath the surface, the seed beneath the soil swelling with potential. The roots growing strong and deep in the darkness, the foundation being laid firm and unseen. He is working intricately, purposefully on your behalf and in you. He is nearer than your next breath, closer than the thoughts in your own mind. He is faithful. Let go of the need to see it all worked out and simply lean into the reality of His presence. Even in the deepest silence, His presence sings over you, not a song of demanding answers, but a lullaby of perfect timing and unconditional, unbreakable love. Rest there, wait there, trust there, for the dawn will surely, beautifully, undeniably come in His perfect time. They didn't see the end, but they trusted the author, and that was enough.